And I feel we are at that point where it's like, this looks pretty goddamn scary. And at the same time, I really feel a lot of hope.
Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report here. I so appreciate all of you. Before we begin this interview with my good and longtime friend, Ole Dammegard, just a quick word from our sponsor. Collagen may be the closest thing we'll ever get to a real fountain of youth. In fact, many health experts now agree that consuming collagen is as crucial as it gets to renewing and revitalizing how you look and feel. Collagen is the most abundant protein in your body, and it essentially is the glue that holds you together. In fact, after age 20, people produce about 12% less collagen in their skin each and every decade. This means by the time you're middle age, you could be producing less than half the collagen you did in your youth. Even worse, things like poor diet, smoking, pollution, and yes, stress can delete your collagen levels even faster. So visit my site, healthwithsgt.com, and purchase the only collagen on the market that I trust. Make your hair healthy and younger looking, support joint flexibility, it strengthens nails, teeth, and gums, promotes strong, healthy muscles, tendons, and ligaments, stronger bones, and supports digestive health. Support your health today with collagen. This is my trusted source. I'll leave the link below this interview. Hey friends, thank you so much for clicking play. It's wonderful to have you back. It really truly is. You know, when we all shelter in place, we're all feeling isolated and lonely. Even if we're with our families, many of us are getting stir crazy. You're at risk of losing everything if you're a small business owner, and it really speaks to the power of government. Now, if we're truly free people, government shouldn't have the type of power that would cause you to lose everything you have. We're in a very strange place at this point in American history, and people around the world are feeling the exact same way. I have back on the line my good friend, my longtime friend, Ole Dammegard from Light on Conspiracies. Ole, how are you?
I'm doing good, but bizarre, unprecedented times for sure.
Yeah, you're day 26 in quarantine, is that right?
Yeah, I live in the south of Spain since some 20 years, and it's like being in a weird movie. We're in absolute lockdown. We're allowed to go to the nearest supermarket, that's it. But we have to be able to show the receipt so that we're not sort of taking groceries from yesterday. If we walk down the street for no reason, we can be fined up to 1,500 euros. That's the same in dollars, more or less, or even more. And if we drive more than one person in a car, the same there. And we have like roadblocks in this small city where I live. So what can I say? It's bizarre. And when you look at how they managed to do this or what is going on, I mean, the thing is, Sean, either we are in the worst of times. I mean, absolute new world order, wet dream, ticking all the boxes, going down the drain. Let me hang myself in a rope and get it over and done with. That is option one. Or there's some fantastic things waiting around the corner. I've never been in a situation where all the intel I get from all over the world, everybody's confused. Everybody's confused. And also, it's like a crossroad in history where you have on one side mainstream media and like fiction driven by psychopaths. And then on the other side, you have what appears to be truth and transparency and compassion and beautiful people on that side. But there's no connecting dots. It's like the information normally is like a gray zone, sometimes very hard to understand what is what, and sort of with psyops involved, and it can be really tricky to figure it out. But here it's like black or white. That's it. That's the way I see it.
Well, I hear you. And here's the thing. You mentioned suicides, and here's what's very troubling about it. Let me just do a quick screen share. This article from time.com, the mainstream media horrors, of course, include time.com, but this is from June 20th of 2019. So this is before any of this induced depression began. Mm-hmm. U.S. suicide rates are at the highest they've been since World War II. Look at that spike, Ole. From the dot-com crash around 2000 to now, we've seen a spike across the country, not just in suicides among adults, but a spike in suicides among teens as well. So I think you're right, my friend. I mean, either we're Either we're on the cusp of a new dawn for freedom and liberty, for humanity, or Henry Kissinger, who just wrote an op-ed demanding more global governance. I agree with you. It's going to be one or the other. And right now, my friend, the data points in terms of the Fed, in terms of the money printing and where that money is going, the data points don't point favorably to liberty and sovereignty for we the people.
I tell you, whatever movie you've seen and whatever story in the old days and in all the legends and so on, it's always been the underdog against this, like David and Goliath. And about 90% of the way into the story, it seems like everything is lost. There's no way out. There's absolutely no possible way of getting out of this alive. And then if you continue watching the movie or listening to the legend or story, boom, if they keep focused and balanced, they will manage to solve the problem or get to the end of the movie or the end of the story or the legend or whatever. And I feel we are at that point where it's like, this looks pretty goddamn scary. And at the same time, I really feel a lot of hope. But my mind can very easily go into fear mode and say, oh my God, what is going on? I've never, ever have we seen anything like it. And how it's like, once again, this extreme. I mean, in one way, it's incredible. The whole world have united under force, I must say, but on one side of the problems and giving Mother Earth a chance to finally breathe. You know, we've stopped poisoning her. She's getting a chance just to recuperate a little bit after being raped for so many years. And no traffic, no pollution, no chemtrails. I mean, all of these things are fantastic. And then on the other side, you have like a global martial law plan that has just gone into action without a single shot being fired. I mean, how did that happen? So it's like, what are we in? I'm here locked in to an apartment, a 2-room apartment where we're not allowed to leave. In one way, I feel super optimistic and I visualize the fantastic future we're going into, where I hope duality ends and finally we will come to an understanding of a oneness. But at the same time, I got rope hanging down the side of the building, so I can get myself down there should SWAT teams knock in the door, because in Spain here, military is in charge above police. And so somebody like myself who spent so many years being a boil in the butt for these forces, I don't know, so it's like if somebody knocks on the door, could be very bad news. So I have like alternative escape routes, checked out how to get out of here or out of the city, hidden ways and stuff. And at the same time, I meditate on peace and forgiveness. So it's like, what to say? My God, it's crazy.
Well, yeah, it's crazy because we couldn't have seen this just 3 or 4 months ago. So to your point, but here's the thing. The fear-mongering coming from the powers that be has reached a fevered pitch, and it's allowing governors, like the governor of the state in which I live, it's allowing these governors to continue to extend these shelter-in-place orders. Now, there's a couple of states in the nation that haven't locked down anything, and we're not seeing the beer illness spikes in those states. And the question is, when does it end, and how does it end? In your view, paint the prettiest picture you can. How does this end super well in sort of a rebirth of liberty and sovereignty? And just go for it, like a fictional writer. Paint that picture.
Yeah, okay. For one thing, this beer virus is not real. You cannot even get affected the way it's being said. It's only by injection that this virus can spread. And so that's fantastic news. So I don't fear the beer virus at all. I would be happy to go to the land of beers, which is apparently China, without a face mask and go there. I fear that 0%. I fear how it's being used. That really concerns me. And the whole 5+1G system that is being rolled out while we are being set on the inside of these buildings. But a pretty picture is, and some of the intel I get is that there are, and this is from multiple different sources. So it's not only like Q, who I don't follow because I'm afraid of controlled opposition. I don't know who and what Q is or others. So I try to get as a diverse information as possible. And I get information that is very, very positive, and that is mass arrests, a real target on this global cabal, that there are being multiple different operations ongoing where they're planning on taking them out or arresting them, and where there will be a shutdown of the internet for some 7 to 10 days. And the reason for that is to stop all of these illegal transactions that are going on, and once and for all break the back of the Federal Reserve. And then when the reset will be there, it's just like rebooting a computer. It will be without these viruses or psychopaths, and it will be on a global financial situation based on gold. And I've even, in my cell phone, I got photos of the new dollar bills that was supposed to have been released on Thanksgiving last year, but then this whole beer virus thing appeared. But if you want to, I think I can add some to the picture, because I think that this whole thing was meant to be way worse than we're seeing. So I think that could explain a little bit about this soft approach that we've ended up in.
Yeah, please expand upon it. And if you don't mind, do you have any evidence you can provide us? You say you're getting hope-filled emails and information. You mentioned mass arrests. Can you give us any quantifiable evidence at all about mass arrests taking place?
Absolutely not. This is the thing. I can't get any real facts anywhere. It's like rumors and people have heard of, and so it's like confusion time, big. So it's like, I don't know. I wish I had it. That would be fantastic, but I don't. I hear and I'm being told, but I don't get any proof. So, but what I would like to tell you is that it's a bit of a long story, but it will come back to the beer virus. So please bear with me. In October last year, I was in Scandinavia doing a tour, a very intense tour there. And one of the things I was focusing on was the alleged terror attack in Stockholm in April 2017, where a truck is said to have driven down. It was hijacked by an ISIS supporter and drove down a pedestrian street, killing 5 people and injuring a lot of others. Like, I've been looking into these operations for so many years, and one thing that I never ever encountered is a Muslim terrorist. I can tell you that. But what I do bump into all the time are Gladio operation, NATO operations, connected with intelligence agencies like the Mossad and the CIA, and whatever security police on location. But we're looking at the hits done in NATO countries or countries that are connected through what is called 5 Eyes, 9 Eyes, and 14 Eyes, which are secret intelligence agreements with nations, so that we don't see that they're actually connected under the surface, but they are. Anyway, so I've been digging into hundreds of these false flag operations, and I've become quite an expert on it, I must say. And I've been able to predict on international radio 19 of these attacks up to 2 months before they actually happen. And I also managed to stop some of them. So when I was doing this tour, one of the people that I was exposing is a man called Ole Dammegard, who is the chief of security in a cooperation, or how shall I say, a government coordinating organ called Samverkan, which means cooperation. And his task is to, in the case of any emergency, coordinate like the security, the secret police, the government, the police, the military, fire brigades, ambulances, and so on, in a case of an emergency. And here we had such an emergency with this alleged terror attack. But he made a mistake, I would say a major mistake, because he had himself filmed on stage some months later. It's almost like a TED talk where he walks around talking about this terror attack, but he calls it, his presentation is called The Drill That Became Reality. And when you look at how these false flag operations are built up, the drill is always extremely important, because that's when they set it, the whole thing up, rehearse it. And we've been going through this many times, you and I, on your show and so on. So, but what he says is that 1 minute before the attack happened, he raised the terror threat level with a mass email out to all the key people in these organizations. So how can someone raise the terror threat level 1 minute before the attack even happens? I mean, that is insider. It's the best smoking gun I've ever come across. And I don't think that this filmed event was supposed to come out to people like myself. I think it was more filmed just for the inner circle. And maybe somebody with a good heart felt, oh my God, I don't want to be part of this, and leaked it out. I'm not sure. Anyway, so I started tracking down this individual, Ole Dammegard, because this is what a real terrorist looked like. He is absolutely not one of the top people, but on an operational level, he's quite high up there. And one of the things that I saw when I started tracking him down was that he had been moving around in many of these countries where alleged terror attacks had happened the last few years. And so one of the sources was his Twitter account, which was not very big at the time. It was only like 217 followers. But all of these seemed to be connected somehow to his job, intelligence, military, and so on. So I looked more and more into this, and I stumbled across some tweets that were just like mind-blowing. There was one of them where he said, we just celebrated our 500th meeting. That's 500 meeting in this security group. That's a lot of meetings, I would say, especially if it's only supposed to be locally in Stockholm. But anyway, he also said that he had been to Barcelona, Ottawa, he had been in London, he had been in several of these places. And he also works for an international coalition that is funded by the Rockefeller Foundation, and where they call the 100 resilient cities of the world. And when you look at the New World Order, the family with the name of Rockefeller and Rothschilds, they appear at all times. We have also with the beer virus, you have the Rockefellers all the time in the background. So in one of these tweets also, he said that he was now in Barcelona. This was a very, very recent tweet when I saw it, that he was now in Barcelona. It was, and that was where a very similar truck attack or van attack happened, also at more or less the same time as the one in Stockholm. And he said it's very emotional to be back there. And that also he, in this group, now they had decided and locked down 39 locations with a duration of 36 hours, 39 drills in 5 different NATO countries. And I was like, what? Because when you start I've been tracking down these individuals and people like this for the last 3 decades. And so after a while, you start learning the language between them. So it's the same if you were chasing a drug dealer. If you overheard a phone call and he was talking about delivering 5 kilos of salad or lettuce, you would understand that it's not lettuce he's talking about. It's drugs, So I thought, when I looked into the different locations he was talking about, and it seemed to go under the name of Operation Sea Eagle, at least the Swedish part of it, there were 39 coordinated, I believe, attacks being planned for October 23 and 24 with a duration of 36 hours. And the cities and countries were Greater Manchester and London in the United Kingdom. And this was exactly at the time when the big Brexit referendum was going on, meaning should something major happen, like a boom, 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 boom series of terror attacks in London or Manchester, that could help stop the whole Brexit, the exit of the United Kingdom out of the United Nations. Because we have this whole thing also when you look at the United Nations, where in the background and underneath it, we have the same very dark power structure. And with these families, once again, are there right there. So they have been really trying to control Europe through United Nations and so on. So the last thing they want, or the European Union, the European Union is what I'm talking about. The last thing they want is that someone that managed to leave, because that could then inspire other nations to leave as well. Because for most nations that have entered the European Union, it's been not a good deal. The prices have gone straight up, and it was not what we were promised before we entered. Anyway, so that could a mass attack, if we're looking at 39 coordinated attacks instead of drills. I based this on here as an individual who was talking about a drill in Stockholm, but it was actually turned into an attack. And he seems to have been possibly involved in other of these ones. So anyway, it was Manchester and London, as well as Paris, France. That's exactly where they have the problems with the Yellow Vest movement. Then you had Barcelona. That's where they have this more or less identical problem with a part, Catalonia, that wants to leave Spain, thus leaving the European Union as well. So that had we have a coordinated attacks in multiple different countries, these problems could also be solved because of security, we need to install martial law, everybody inside, no big groups in the street. And by the way, we have to shut down the internet because of all of these terrorists being exchanging information and so on over the social media. They've been wanting this for a long time, I can tell you that. And then we had in Sweden, there were 2 drills planned, which was for power plants, one water power plant up in the north of Sweden and one nuclear power plant in Forsmark, which is northeast of Stockholm. And then we have Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And I didn't understand why Rotterdam of all places. But then I was contacted by a naval officer, and she informed me that Rotterdam is actually the mouth of Europe when it comes to the food import. Meaning, if you knock out the harbor of Rotterdam, it could create famine in Europe within a week or two. So when I saw that and I started understanding more and more what could possibly be involved in this operation, I just felt, oh my God, this could be, if I was correct, like a European 9/11 or bigger, that I just somehow stumbled across right into it. And so,
can I ask you something?
For sure.
All right, so taking some notes here. So just so people understand, I think you said that these attacks or drills that could have become attacks were planned for, did you say October 23rd through the 24th of this past year? Okay. Operation Sea Eagle, is that what you called it? Okay. Yeah. So it reminds me a lot of Operation Gladio. For those that don't know what that is, just research it. So often we see these types of drills turn into actual attacks. I think the single best example is 7/7, the 7/7 bombings in London. Mm-hmm. People can research that, of course. We have Peter Powers from Visor, I think it's Visor Consultants, going off memory here, who came on that morning after the attacks happened, and he said, this is just so puzzling. We were running a drill of the exact same scenario in the exact same spots when this happened, and we had to go into live mode. And it's almost as though the whole thing was lost on him, that he didn't know he was taking part in a false flag terror operation, because they use real people in these things, and they use the drills as cover. So let me ask you this. How, in your view, was Operation Sea Eagle or these drills, how were these prevented? Did white hats help prevent this from going live?
Wait. So when I saw that, I just felt sick to my stomach, because also the 24th of October is the day of the United Nations. So should any of these drills or attack have been aimed for against the United Nations in Brussels, that would have justified a military hit, just like Pentagon was hit. And because it was a military installation, that justified a military intervention into this whole thing. Had Pentagon not been hit, it would have been considered differently and not justified these horrible wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I just felt, oh my God. So what I did was, this was on October the 21st, which was like 2 days, 48 hours before this happened. So I thought, we've got like 48 hours. So what I did was, I've got this, I've done between 500 and 1,000 interviews internationally. So I have this fantastic network of incredible people like yourself. And what I did was, I tried to contact as many as possible. And I did like 5 to 10 minute interviews from 4 p.m. to 4 a.m., just pumping it out, saying, this is what I fear could happen. Please, please, please spread it. So the next day, after 24 hours, I started checking the number of views, and we were up to at least a couple of 100,000 views of people that were then aware of what could go down. And this is the only way that we can fight these things, is by exposing them before they go down. That is at least the most efficient one.
I agree. And let me just say, you can continue, but I think, and this is what I've been saying about the pandemic, the manufactured crisis we're facing now. So Brexit went through. President Trump is definitely on track, or at least was, probably still is, if we have elections in this country, to get reelected in 2020. So the elite played the pandemic card. So I think that's where we are. And you can give me your views on that or continue with the rest of your story there. But you know, the Illuminati playing cards? There is a quarantine card, there's a CDC card, and then there is a global population or a depopulation card. They played the first two, with the goal being third, depopulation. This is my view. They played the pandemic card because they were running out of viable cards to play because we the people were winning, Ole.
Yeah. So, Sean, I need to continue because, like I said, it's going to come back to the beer virus thing. Because on the 23rd and 24th, when these days came around, absolutely nothing happened. So I thought, okay, either I was totally wrong, or where the 39 drills they were talking about, what happened to those? Because they didn't take place either. Anyway, so that day I was contacted by a freelance journalist in Brussels, which is the heart of Europe and also where the headquarters of NATO are. And he said that he had been, for quite a time, he had been feeling that there was something major was being building up. And he had, from military intelligence sources there, everybody was feeling something big is coming, but they didn't know what it was. And then he said, then I saw your warning, and suddenly everything fell into place. And so he asked me, are you aware of what's going on in Brussels right now? I said, I have no idea. He said, they have called in all the defense ministers of NATO to a crisis meeting in Brussels. So, and he said that was because of the warning. So I felt, okay. I mean, so it seems like suddenly we're talking about this possibly having a major effect on something very negative. So the next day, all Israeli embassies globally shut down due to what is called a general strike for better pay. I mean, really, do you think that of all countries that the staff of Israel in the embassies could organize globally to shut all of them down at the same time? I don't think so. I think there was something totally different going on in the background. Then you had, there's a very well-respected website called voltairenet.org, which had articles from prime ministers and stuff like that. And they, that day, had an article saying, NATO near implosion. NATO very close to just breaking up and being destroyed from the inside. And then you had the very next day as well, after that, Jens Stoltenberg, who's the chief of NATO, the former Norwegian prime minister, and who was given, I would very strongly suggest, given that position thanks to his involvement, direct involvement in the blowing up of the Norwegian government building and indirectly the mass shooting on Utøya. So not him shooting personally, but he was key in that operation. I've done a presentation called When Terror Struck Norway. Check that one out. That's just one of many. Anyway, so a lot of things was going down these days. Also, Vice President Mike Pence and your defense minister was called back urgently to Washington. And so something during these 2 days, the 23rd and 24th, went down that was very different to what I believe was planned. Whatever it was, and I really think that I was on there to something there because something major got stopped and something different started. Anyway, that was October 23 and 24. But if you go back just a few days before that, on October the 18th, now we find out that there was an event, a so-called event called 201 in New York, which was a pandemic simulation. It was in one of the high-class hotels there. It was called Event 201, but I don't think it's called Event 201. When you look at the logo, it's 2 and then like a globe in the middle and a 1. I think it's called Event 21, connected to Agenda 21, which is part of this whole Orwellian future that they're planning to for us, you know, the old George Orwell horror scenario. And so at that event, they were going through an exact drill or rehearsal of what we've seen gone down in the world since January the 1st and onwards. I mean, identical. You have show reels, you got everything there. You can find it on the internet. And it's even the same virus. It's the coronavirus, and they have all of it, the whole setup with it, where they end up with 65 million dead. That is part of this whole thing. So when you look at who funded this place, have you gone through this Event 201 on your show?
Oh yeah, we've talked about it in detail. So it's the Gates Foundation, it's John Hopkins, in the World Economic Forum. So you always got to get the bankers involved in this stuff, of course. You mentioned Rockefeller earlier on, and Rothschild. I do too, often, because we need to know who the real enemies of humanity are. And I've been telling people about a Rockefeller document from May 2010, a white paper called Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development. And on page 18 is a chapter called Lockstep, which is a blueprint for a Rockefeller world, in my view. And page 18, it says, a world of tighter top-down government control and more authoritarian leadership with limited innovation and growing citizen pushback. And that entire chapter talks about a pandemic globally causing this lockstep and more authoritarian control. So you're right over the target when you mention Rockefeller.
And then at the very same day, on October the 18th, there was the World Military Games in Wuhan. And Wuhan is not just any city in China. It's famous for being rebellious, you know.
It's also a 4+1G pilot city.
Yeah, they had that whole thing rolled out the year before, in February 2019. More than 10,000 base station of 4.1G was installed there. So they are the place for this whole thing to start, if you look at it. But there were more than 10,000 military people on location due to these World Military Games from more than 103. Let me see here. I think it was 103 nations from all over the world. So I believe what was meant to happen this day was that they were planning on coordinating the virus drill with these 39 coordinated attacks. That the drill in New York, which was just 5 days before the 23rd, was there as a rehearsal, and then they were supposed to go live, all of it hitting at once, like a massive, knockout on the world. That, I believe, was the plan. That by divine intervention, I don't know what happened, that I stumbled across this, and so many people out there reacted so fast. Because can you imagine if we had on the very same day, October 23rd and 24th, 39 coordinated attacks, some of them against the United Nations headquarters in Brussels, a nuclear power plant disaster in Sweden, or alleged, and this virus there. So absolute mayhem all over the world, plus the harbor of Rotterdam knocked out, so that you would create famine on top of the whole thing in Europe. I mean, a better rollout of martial law or the excuse to roll this thing out, I've never heard of. And then you have, the thing is with this whole concentration of military power in Wuhan there, was it possibly that they were supposed to be there, then all of this mayhem happened, and the soldiers were called back into their all of these different nations, and officially and not knowingly bringing the virus to these countries. Was that the idea? That the virus would spread in Wuhan, all the soldiers would fly back because of this crisis, and then that would then be what you could blame for this virus to spread to all of these nations so fast. So I really believe that possibly half of this was taken away from them, and then they had to, at that crisis meeting in Brussels, they had to regroup, say, we need to just get off the radar here for a while. There's too many people aware of what we've been planning. So we need to stay low for a few months. And then we hit it at January the 1st, boom. But this time it will be a softer one just with the virus. So this is my take on it. And I see what we're seeing being rolled out here is identical to the Event 201. So the people that were there really should be put up against the wall and asked some very serious questions. And also, we should check out what are they doing at this very moment, because I would very much suggest that they are the ones rolling this whole show at the moment on a street level. Absolutely not at the top.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I've said that if the Patriots are in control, we know who should be detained and interrogated. We know who the enemies of humanity are. I completely agree. You mentioned Q earlier. I do want to do a screen share. You know, Q does leave us drops that are powerful. First, from Ephesians, the book of Ephesians, the armor of God. This is absolutely 100% correct. Put on the full armor of God so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly realms. The world will soon understand. Well, I certainly hope so. We've got the plan from Kissinger, which we could read here in a second. But here's an issue. Q linked to the Cannibal Club. He says, do you think spirit cooking was just pretend? Well, here's the thing. We know that spirit cooking isn't pretend. We know that these people are into the darkest possible things imaginable, including cannibalism. But linking to this site is not very helpful because this has been debunked for a long time as being a satirical website. This is not a real club, although I would never dispute that clubs like this do exist in the world, and these sick elite are into that kind of stuff. Ole, I've said that the Hostel series of fictional films, there's 3 in the Hostel series of films, those are fictionalized documentaries. Those movies are not fiction. They're fictionalized documentaries because they show us exactly what these sick Satanists do. These elite are truly into some of the most unimaginable horrors possible.
Listen, this Q phenomena, I have no idea, because I've avoided it very deliberately, because it might very well be perfectly true and fantastic, but I'm very, cautious, because I know how these dark forces operate, especially with control opposition, where you go in, you suddenly have somebody step forward and start releasing this incredible information, so that thousands and thousands of people will start following and saying, oh my God, it's amazing, amazing. Then after a few months, it will be like 98% absolute incredible stuff and 2% propaganda, then 90, 10%. Then 80, 20%. And in the end, it's so hard to know what is what. And so I'm very aware of staying away from this type of information, because I don't know. I truly hope what with these mass arrests and so on being carried out apparently, and I really, really hope that is true, because that would be fantastic. There's also a very interesting number of leaders and prime ministers and, I don't know, actors that have been with connection to what we call Pizzagate and this whole thing, where so many of them are now having been infected with this virus, they claim, and are having this corona, so they pulled back. But what's going on, and CEOs that are stepping down, what's going on? I don't know. I just hope for the best. That I do.
Well, let's take a look at that Kissinger quote. This is from Q. Again, we know who the enemies of humanity are. The plan. Quote, today, Americans would be outraged if UN troops entered LA to restore order. Tomorrow they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told there was an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all peoples of the world will pledge with world leaders to deliver them from this evil. The one thing every man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being granted to them by their world government. Henry Kissinger, in an address to the Bilderbergs in Evian, France, May 21st, 1992. So we know exactly who the enemies of humanity are. We know exactly who should be included in these mass arrests. And here's where we sit. Now, fortunately, Operation Sea Eagle didn't go through as planned, But you're sitting there in quarantine. I'm sitting here in my state in lockdown, issued by the Democratic state governor, who just extended it another 30 days, while small businesses are being absolutely decimated and people are being bankrupted. This is where we sit.
It's I don't know what to say. When it comes to dear Henry there, I mean, that's one of the worst war criminals that has ever walked on this planet. Bush Sr. is another one. I mean, these are, if you want to see what a monster looks like, that's the way they look. But just like you say, here we are, so obediently sitting indoors, just waiting for something to happen. It's very strange times. And now we've been told that there are more and more 5G or 4+1G towers being erected here on the coast in the south of Spain while we're being inside. And I believe very much that could be a great part of why we're being locked in, because they don't want us to see this, or they don't want us to stop the construction of these towers. But these towers are put out there without anyone's permission. No sane individual who looked into this technology would accept it, because it's absolute military installations and pushing us into smart cities and the whole new world wet dream digital grid of horror for the future.
Yeah, and I would add 0 health studies done by the industry that is pushing this thing. 4+1G is dangerous. It can be weaponized, and the industry that's pushing it didn't do a single health study, because they can't. They can't prove that it's safe.
Because it's not. It's very, very dangerous. I mean, it's millimeter waves and very, I mean, it's dangerous for everything alive. You know, the only thing that could survive it is the bear virus, because viruses are not alive, that's the whole incredible thing. When you look at this whole thing that we're logged in for, the official narrative doesn't match up at all. It's absolute based on 100% lies, and we're just buying it and accepting it. I don't get it.
Can I show you something? This is very important. Let me show you something. So when we talk about, we've been saying 4+1G, guys, because we don't want to get banned by YouTube, but you know what we're talking about. So we can't really skirt around it now, because look at the screen share here. Check this out. So here's how you know the powers that be, which include the mainstream Mockingbird horror media, are in on covering up the dangers of 5G. This is how you know, because in lockstep, they are all promoting 5G and trying to debunk anyone that questions its safety, and anyone who says there might be a link between what we saw in Wuhan, a pilot city for 5G, and where the beer virus exploded and so many people we believe died. They're trying to shoot down anybody that would link those two things together. So this is how you know. This is exactly what they did on 9/11. It's exactly what they did on 7/7. The deep state traitors to humanity, which includes some of the families we've already mentioned and people like Henry Kissinger, they own and control the mainstream horror media. That's how you know 5G is something that you should be concerned about. And it's something that is dangerous, because in lockstep, look at this. These are all TheVerge.com, Time.com, Bloomberg.com, NewYorkTimes.com, FoxNews.com, coronavirus 5G conspiracy theory debunked from Fox News. So this is what we're up against, Ole. We are up against a future that will be so dark for humanity if the truth is not told, and if these mass arrests don't occur. We're coming full circle here. The way you began it, you feel like it's going to go one way or the other, and that's what I've been saying. I completely agree. We're either going to come through this with light and sovereignty and liberty, or we're going to come through, those of us who survive, in chains. I don't know how to sugarcoat it, because I think I'm seeing it the same way you are.
There is no sugarcoat. It's like, it's very raw. It's like, I've from all of these years when I've been involved in these areas, I've had a pretty good understanding of a lot of things, how I learned it over the years. And here I am, absolutely confused. So, and what to do? I would say I spoke to a friend of mine in Sweden when I was on tour there, and he said that he had locally gone to the authorities and asked who gave the permission to build these or erect these towers on these buildings in my little town. And they said, well, we don't really know, but you have to speak to this. And he had sort of to really try and find the person who had given the permissions. And it turned to be a woman who was working only part-time from home. And so he spoke directly to her, and she said, well, listen, I think it was about 8 years ago, it just got too complicated. So we stopped giving them building permission. We just let it be open to all the house owners to deal directly with these companies, meaning that there are no building permissions for these towers. It's only that these big companies, they go deal with the landowner or the owner of the building, and then pay them a sum of money, and poof, off they go. So I would say one way would be to, if you're let out, contact your local authorities and check, are these legally erected here or not? Because if they're not, then I would say blow them up. We're talking about self-defense at this point. I'm not pro-violence, but I'm saying, what are we going to do once they switch these ones on? Because then it's not pleasant. We're talking about a lot of symptoms where air just is taken from the body, that you just fall over, you suffocate. Also that the water molecules in your body can really that's why they get these fever symptoms, because they start getting very agitated and stuff. So it's very, very brutal what can be done, but they need this technology. And the reason they need it, because there's so few. That's the whole thing. We're back to the Wizard of Oz. When you look at the so-called elite and at the top of the pyramid, I would say, they say it's the top of the pyramid, but what they forget to tell you is that the pyramid is turned upside down. So it's the lowest of the low of the low of the low at that top or the bottom of that pyramid. That's where they really are. So it's what is being planned here is bad news, bad news, bad news. So we need to join together. We're billions and there are only a few thousand in total. So I think around maybe 8 to 10,000 in total globally. We are billions. And this is why I believe that they're freaking out. That's why it's gloves up at this time. There's no soft coding. They just go full speed ahead, trying to force this upon us and push us into this golden gate of digital total control before we wake up. But I see people popping up like popcorn, like in the thousands every day. So there's like this speed, a race between good and evil, the light and the dark. And we are just part of it,
Yeah. Well, we know what the light of this world is, and we know who the darkness of this world is. It is the spiritual wickedness in high places, as exemplified by people like the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds that seek to enslave humanity with their usury machines and their usury machinations. But the good news is he is risen. Luke 24, verses 6 and 7. He is not here. He has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still with you in Galilee. The Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men, be crucified, and on the third day be raised again. Matthew 28, 6, he is not here. He has risen, just as he said. So that's the good news, my friend.
Just like he said, when they killed him, forgive them, they do not know what they're doing. And here we are in a universe that without these absolute assholes, we would not have met. You and I would not have met. So many people would not have risen to this level of spiritual involvement had it not been for these horrible, horrible individuals. So in one way, it's almost like we have to thank them for, like in a gym, without the weights, you won't be able to build your muscles. And without these, whatever you want to call them, we wouldn't have been able to build our spiritual muscles. Right. So in this universe of duality, we need up to understand down, we need right to understand left, we need evil to understand goodness, and then the choice is ours. But I know for sure that I will walk the way of love and goodness, that until the day I die. And I will do everything I can to transcend these horror things and this very, very dark energy. So, but the thing is, with good and evil, what I think is amazing is in so many of these situations, just with these different frequencies, when you really face evil, it backs off. It backs off if you can meet it fearlessly, and it just disappears like a really ugly, horrible fart in the horizon.
Yeah.
But if you bend over and give up and let into that fear, they can totally control you.
Yeah.
So,
well, we're not going to give up. I think there has to be a point, though, where people on these lockdowns in these states, they've got to rebel at some point. This is absolute nonsense that the government gets to pick and choose which businesses are open and which ones are closed. And you'll notice that all of the ones are closed are the small mom and pop and the small businesses. The small ones are the ones that are closed as these people get bankrupted. My guest today has been Ole Dammegard, one of my best friends out there. Ole, thank you so much. And for those that want to support you and support your work, can you tell them how to do that and how to find you?
My website is lightonconspiracies.com. I'm a one-man band, but with a tiny little, small, incredible team around me. I've been doing this for some 30, 40 years soon. And if you would like to support me in those times, please, my website is, there's donation buttons. I'm on Patreon. I've got a membership area. I've written several books. My newsletter, my monthly newsletter, also where you can see exactly when I predicted these things and when they then happened. And I must say, my last name has actually become a verb. To Dammegard is to predict and correctly locate terror attacks before they happen. So I think that's quite fun. But I would very much like to end with a prayer. It's not a Christian one, but like Jesus, he did not judge anyone. So here it goes. May the entire universe be filled with peace and joy, love and light. May everyone, and especially the ones who hurt us, be filled with peace and joy, love and light. May the light of truth overcome all darkness, so victory to that light. For me, it's extremely important how we deal with this situation, that we don't go out and start lynching times, even though if we get the chance to do it. I mean, it would be very simple for us to eliminate these few thousands of people that have been behind so much horror and so on. But we have to look upon what are we creating and what kind of really bad karma will we create as well by chopping the heads of these individuals. Because if you study world history, you will see revolutions. What does that even mean? It means revolving. It goes round, round, round. And the people that have taken over in history have more or less always become even worse than the ones they took over after, So it's like we have a possibility here to take a step that has been never done before, but where we transcend this whole thing and use, just like in Aikido, use their very powerful attacks on you, divert the energy and aim it right back at them, but in a circular motion. Instead of hitting back, just let them fall on their own.
Yeah, amen. All right, well, I love it. I love your outlook and love and light. We'll just leave it there, Ole, love and light. Thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you, Sean.
All right.
Best of luck to all of us. Bless us all.
Yeah, God bless everyone listening. My best to you and your family, Ole, and my best to everyone listening. Thank you so much to all of you. You are the truth and light in this world, so go out and spread it. And because we can all make a difference within our sphere of influence and thereby make a difference in the world. Guys, I'll remind you, for real news 24/7, you can visit us directly at sgtreport.com, the antidote to corporate propaganda and mockingbird mainstream media whore lies 24/7. So thank you so much for your support, guys. God bless, guys. Bye-bye.
The bankers really are the sovereign power, and the deep state is really sort of like the bankers' henchmen.